Good to go, Kelly.
Okay, thank you. Welcome everyone to the Monday, December 14th meeting of the Common Council's Public Safety Committee. Can everyone hear me? Thank you. We're here to have a follow-up meeting to our police reform meeting from back in early November. We had a couple of pieces of legislation that we were working on that dealt with changing some of the way that the Albany Police Department does business. We in the first meeting that we had, we kind of went through legislation, and we'd gotten some recommendations from the Community Police Review Board, and we're trying to incorporate those. And this was supposed to be a meeting to kind of try to finalize that, but based on the CPRB legislation is complicated. And also we just got another recommendations letter a couple of days ago from the CPRB. And I really want to incorporate them in both the discussion and in any changes that we make to the legislation. So what I would like to do is, I think just based on our earlier conversations from the previous meeting, that local laws, both H and I, will be good to go, and we can pass out of committee. The CPRB local law J will be a lengthier discussion. But just in general, just talking about how we got here, there's stuff going on nationally that brings us to the place that we are. It's not a new thing. These reforms have been in the making and been needed long before the incident with Mr. Floyd. I'm in a unique place on this, having I'm a Black man, so it's my lived experience. Certainly not to the extent that Mr. Floyd dealt with, and I'm a police officer, and probably always will be, and think that way. We need change. We need change, and this is it. We're having a discussion and trying to come to an agreement on what's acceptable. What I would argue is that from the police side, we need a little more give. This isn't punitive. It's not. It's these people's lives are affected and impacted with some of the decisions that we make, or you all are making now as police officers. So it's important to taking that into account and have that be a part of the decision making. So what I would like to do is, since really the most heaviest lift in this reform centers on CPRB recommendations, I would actually like to hear from, and excuse me, I actually didn't do an accounting of who's here. Welcome. We have committee members here, Mr. Hoey. Let's see, Mr. Hoey. Who else is, Mr. Igo is here from the committee. Ms. Frederick is here from the committee. Am I missing any other committee member? Oh, Alfredo Ballerin. Mr. Ballerin is here also from the committee. That's it for our committee. In terms of council members that are here, we have Mr. Johnson, Mr. Conti, Mr. Nani, Mr. Flynn. I forget anyone. Okay. And then we have our staff, our attorney, John Raphael Pichardo, the Corporation Counsel, Brett Williams, who's not our staff, and Michelle Andre. That's our staff. CPRB folks, Dr. Vanilla Harden, Ms. Nairobi Vives. There's someone dark in the middle of the screen. I can't tell who it is.
Sorry, Kelly, got muted.
All right, someone muted. So what was the last thing you heard? Sorry.
You were
sorry
mentioning
about
about somebody in a dark space.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I got a dark square in the middle of my screen. I'm not sure who that is. Okay, I'd like to recognize
It's Vince Thompson.
Okay, Mr. Thompson. We have Council President Ellis, who else? Ava Ayers from the CPRB, our superintendent. Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have had JR do this. Kawita Adams, our superintendent. I think that's
I can jump in if you want.
Yeah, that's why I usually have you do this. People are
Yes.
moving around and disappearing.
No problem. I have, according to my list, I see soon to be recommended from previously Mr. Paul Collins Hackett is here for the who is a potential CPRB member whose resolution is on the agenda. I see the director of Albany Housing, Chiquita Diablo. Let's see, Councilman Jack Flynn, Councilman Johnson, Councilman Joe Igo, Councilman Richard Conti, let's see, Danielle Hilly, Chief City Auditor Dorcia Pleers. Let's see, I see Luke Randis from Vocal New York. Benelia Hardin from the CPRV, Dr. Hardin. And members from the public, please excuse me. Let's see, I see a couple people from APD. See Commander Patello here. Let's see who else. I see Lieutenant Joe McDade here. And those are the people I know. Those are the people who I know.
And Mark Mishler, Esquire, as well.
Okay.
Did you get Chief Auditor Dorsey, Dr. Dorsey?
Yes,
Okay.
Yes, I did.
All right. So we'll try to move on. So what I really want to do is hear from maybe a representative of the CPRB, someone that can speak to the ideas and thoughts behind the reforms. I don't see any takers.
Kelly, I
think I would start with Ava, if she doesn't mind starting off. I know she's the chair of CPRB in the collaborative, but I think
she still
brings a very unique perspective coming from the collaborative side as well.
Sure, I'm happy to summarize. So, and I want to make super clear before I start that I'm not a member of the CPRB. So, I serve on the collaborative as a representative of Albany Law School, and the law school essentially staffs the CPRB. So, I'm happy to summarize the recommendations that the board made last week, if that's helpful. But I'd be grateful if Nairobi or Venelia wants to jump in at any point, please do that. So just very briefly, as the committee knows, the CPRB has previously sent a couple of letters recommending various things in terms of potential changes. And you can find those letters on the CPRB's website, which is albanycprb.org. If you go to reports and minutes, you'll be able to find policy recommendations for 2020. The first letter, which was sent in June, made some recommendations, which I believe have, for the most part, been incorporated into the bill that's already in front of the council. Those included that all APD policies be posted publicly, that all disciplinary information about APD officers or disciplinary process be made publicly available, as well as video footage and contracts or information about using surveillance technology. So as well as a recommendation that APD collect data on traffic stops and other incidents so that adequate information could be gathered about racial profiling and other forms of bias in policing. The CPRB also recommended that board members be given full access to information about officers that are subject of a complaint and audio and video footage. So in other words, the board recommended both that the public get that information and that the board itself get that information. The second letter, which was on July 5th, recommended that the CPRB be given the power to conduct independent investigations. So currently, as the committee members know, the CPRB does investigations only in the sense that it reviews the investigations that are conducted by the Office of Professional Standards, that is the Internal Affairs Unit for APD. The CPRB recommended that it be given its own independent investigative authority. It also recommended that the CPRB be given subpoena power and that that the Common Council clarified that the CPRB can initiate its own complaints. In other words, rather than waiting for a member of the public to file a complaint, the CPRB would be able to initiate its own complaints. The board members believe that that power already exists, but the statute could be more clear on that point. The board also asked for authorization to hire independent full-time counsel. Currently, the Albany Law School advises the board, but the role of legal counsel falls to the Office of Corporation Counsel within the city, which is the same entity that ultimately provides legal advice to the police department. And so the recommendation was for independent counsel. The board also asked for funding for a position called complainant advocate, which is somebody who would be tasked with assisting complainants with filing a complaint, but also providing other support that they need. Currently, the Government Law Center does support complainants. We talk them through the process. We help them understand. We're in regular contact with them. This position would be not only to do that, but when complainants come to the board, they sometimes have other issues. They've been traumatized, or they're in financial need, or they have mental health issues that need to be addressed. And this would be a position that could help with those. So all of that was preface. The most recent set of recommendations, which were just sent to this committee over the weekend after being written up, were as follows. One, authorizing the CPRB to have independent disciplinary power apart from APD. In other words, the power similar to what the Rochester Police Accountability Board now has to discipline Albany Police Department officers. Alternatively, giving the CPRB the power to express judgment about the appropriateness of discipline prior to the discipline being imposed. So in other words, right now, as discipline works its way through the department, put the CPRB into that loop somewhere so that they're consulted and have the opportunity to voice a view on it. Third, authorizing the CPRB to conduct a full audit or inspection of a police officer's disciplinary history when they've been the subject of a complaint. Fourth, ensuring the CPRB is representative of the community by appointing or potentially allowing residents to elect a member that is a victim of police brutality and at least one member that resides in a neighborhood or district with disproportionate police activity. Fifth, authorizing and funding the CPRB to conduct an annual survey of police community relations, similar to what the Center for Law and Justice did with their recent study, but on a funded and more regular basis. And finally, requiring that a racial bias audit, like the one that was recently conducted by CNA, be conducted at least once every 5 years. So obviously that's a lot of recommendations, and I want to be clear again that I'm not speaking for myself. I'm summarizing what the board did. So Nairobi or Vanelia, is there anything that you want to add to that?
Sure. Thank you, Ava, for summarizing.
Thank you.
In general and overall, what the board is seeking, I think I spoke to this at the last meeting as well, is re-envisioning the board to be an independent entity that really can serve the community. We have heard from many members of the community saying that the process is not understandable, it's lengthy, and many of the recommendations that we have and proposals that we put forward, such as independent investigative power and subpoena power, seek to make the process more efficient and also to separate us from the investigation that that APD conducts. And overall, also with the independent counsel, like Ava said, currently we would be using corporation counsel, and there just is an inherent conflict there. So just the overarching purpose of all of these proposals, discipline, investigation, subpoena power, all those things, is to make the board stronger, to make the recommendations that we make and the review that we do to have more teeth, as many people in the community have been calling for years. So Vanelia, I don't know if you have anything to add, but that is our basic purpose.
No, nothing more to add, Nairobi and Ava. Thanks so much. I'm open to any questions anyone else has for clarification on the recommendations.
Okay, so thank you. I know I want to let some of the committee members speak, but Mr. Conti, I know you have to leave. Do you've got the historical perspective. You kind of wrote most of this up. You want to speak?
Oh, sure. I'm going to probably jump back and forth. I have another meeting I have to be at, so I might be back and forth and try to do two. So, as I indicated with the three CPRB letters, I think the one we had on June 22nd was the one we had when we were drafting the amendments. So we tried to incorporate those, and then the July 5th one came in later, and I think there are elements there that we want to incorporate, including clarifying the independent subpoena power that was in the initial draft. I'd like to hear some of the discussion in terms of the fifth letter, which I really just kind of did a lot of reviewing. And I think what we're seeing is this, body really evolving from where we were when this was first established back in 2000 and 2020, which was back in 2000, 20 years ago, which was a different time. This was seen somewhat as the middle ground between a totally independent board and someone that was kind of advisory, but we got there. One of the areas that I really have always, which I'd like to hear more discussion on, is the independent disciplinary power. And I'm trying to square that with the need for department heads to be able to have disciplinary power over their own employees. And what is the impact of, in effect, or at least in certain cases, taking that away from the chief? So that's something I just want to understand a little bit more about, and maybe some more discussion on that and how that works. That's the main one that really jumps out on me, that I'd like to have. And then in terms of the appointment and the composition of the board, I mean, it was always intended that it be representative of the city as a whole, and making sure that the appointees were fair, unbiased, independent. I forget what the language in there was. In terms of putting members on who explicitly had experiences with police brutality, for example, are you, and not to delegitimize any of those concerns, but are you putting someone on that might have a bias, and that bias might reflect in terms of some of the judgments? I'm not sure if I'm trying to express it in a way to how do you separate that out, et cetera. So, but I know the intent is to have more discussion on this tonight, but not to act tonight. And I think it's a good conversation and a process that we're getting through here.
Okay. Yeah, Ms. Vivas, you want to respond to?
I was going to say to the appointment of board members that are may have been a victim of police misconduct or brutality, or live in an area that is overrepresented with police contact. I don't know if it's an and or an or, Ava. I don't have it in front of me, but our purpose in requesting that is just so that the board is always truly representative of the people that are in contact with the police and who the neighborhoods that are being over police. So I don't know that speaking to the bias of someone that may be a victim of police brutality. I don't know. I think it was an or, Ava, is it?
Sorry, the language says cities should appoint or allow citizens to appoint or elect at least one member that is a victim of police brutality and at least one member that resides in a neighborhood with disproportionate police activity. But I don't remember if there was really discussion at the meeting about and or there.
Okay.
If I may add, Councilman, this is Benelia, that another part of this is about having representation that is different, non-traditional, than the same community leaders stepping up to create not just the transparency, but the relationship building that we talk about and filling that gap between policing and community members. So we really want to have other community members who, yes, unfortunately may have experienced police brutality, but and or not. There are community members who don't experience this, but are within communities that are disproportionately impacted.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Harden. So what I'd also like to hear from Commander Bacciuello. I mean, you're tied to the CPRB. Could you add a comment?
Yes, thank you, Kelly, and good evening, everybody. I've been well informed on the proposals that have been raised, I believe since either early June or late May. The CPRB has been fantastic at keeping me in the loop on some of the things they want to try to enhance as far as their teamwork and assistance in what my office does and answering the complaints from the community. So I'm very well informed on the proposals and the ideas that are presented tonight.
Okay, yes, but do you care to comment or offer your thoughts? That would be helpful.
So I'm not sure if I'm in a position to agree or disagree with any of them, but there are certain proposals I think that would be very helpful in our overall goal for transparency, with regards to the investigations and ensuring the community members that bring those issues to our attention as police department, that they're being investigated properly, objectively and impartially. So I mean, that's all I really have. I mean, I've shared my thoughts the best that I can within our CPRB meetings. And I've told the board that, there are certain proposals on the agenda that I do think that actually would help.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Kelly, I think the chair of the CPRB had her hand up.
Okay, you got to help me out. I can't see her.
Ivy, are you still?
Yeah, I'm still here. Thanks, JR. Have a little bit of laryngitis. I just wanted to say, I want to again thank you all for having this meeting. To follow up with what Nairobi and Ava and Vanilla are saying, and also to address Councilman County's question, Conti's concern. I do feel that we're moving originally, as you said, when the board was formed, we were in a different time. I think that what's happening is that things are coming together in here locally and with what people's voices, community voices, to get us to the point where now we do need to expand the CPRB and also be more inclusive as far as members go. We want to make sure that we continue to have I keep saying this, a diverse group of people that bring diverse ideas. So I don't think it's so much that we lose our objectiveness if we have experiences with that didn't work out so well with police. I think it's a view, a community view, a necessary conversation, if you will, that needs to happen. And that's why we want to expand the membership of this board and have more people on here that have experienced some of the things that we do see in our cases. Thanks for letting me in on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So what I'd like to do is committee members that would like to weigh in. I only got one screen here, so I can't see hands.
Kelly? Joe Igo.
Okay.
I just glanced over the latest letter I received sometime today, and I had some questions. One that really stood out was, I know they're asking for 1% of the total of the police department's budget. Okay. Now, I don't know how much money they're going to need for some of the things they want, but tonight I just heard another new one, a technical advocate. I don't know if it's a part-time person from the whoever, if it's Albany Law, if it's somebody else, which was briefly discussed at another meeting. There's an independent counsel. Then there was investigators, etc. Now, I don't know what this is adding up to, okay? So it's just one thing that came to mind. And we really have to look at that budget in light of everything that's going on now. So I have no idea. And I thank them for recognizing some of the concerns of getting in the independent disciplinary powers, because it's something that has to be negotiated with the unions, right? And until that time, I don't know how we go forward with it. I'm not sure what else right now, but the survey and the audit we've done. And you know what, right now I want to give some kudos to the police department, some of the things that they've been ahead on. And I thought we were taking this up first tonight, but the cameras, okay, that's their standing operating procedures right now, I believe. And I think Alfredo's piece on the statistics was a big concern that come up in the audit. I think we're ready to do that. I know I am.
Yep.
So sometime tonight, I think we can get that out of the way. And I don't know, I have to get back to my notes here, but I just wanted to start it off.
Right, and thank you, Mr. Igo. It's a lot. So as I said, when I started out about H&I, local laws H&I, we should be able to pass those out tonight. Last meeting we had, there wasn't a whole lot of discussion around them. We're in agreement on the data and whatnot, so that'll be fine. This CPRB legislation is complicated. There's intended and unintended consequences, and it's a lot of stuff beyond the control of what
the other
we're
thing
doing right here.
that come to mind when I first saw the request for subpoena power. When this started 20 years ago, okay, they were supposed to come if they wanted to subpoena somebody, was supposed to come to the council. In 20 years, this council has never gotten one request. So now all of a sudden, 20 years, they want complete subpoena power. And it's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I would argue that we're in a different time now, Mr. Igo.
Well, we are, but I mean, some of the stuff's been, whether it's been edging up or whatever for the need, but we never heard of it. And that kind of bothered me, you know, because I was a compromise back then, and compromise that was never used. And I know there were issues before that probably could have been used, and yeah, just my 2 cents right now. I'd like to go this more thorough since I just received it.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Igo. Mr. Holy?
Yeah, I just want to say I'm excited. I like what we're dealing with tonight.
and I'm going to sit and listen. I want to hear what the community says. I'm really would like to hear, what people think, and hopefully we'll come up with solutions. Thank you.
Kelly, I see Councilwoman Frederick and Mr. Ballerin too.
Thank you. So I just want to say, upon my initial read of this letter, I do generally agree with all the recommendations listed. I think they're needed at this time. And I think that it definitely echoes what the chair of the CPRB stated, that we are all coming together. We're sort of working through this, evolving, and these are coming out of those conversations. So upon initial glance, I'm in agreement to this and would like to see the legislation modified, but I do want to hear from the community and get their thoughts. Second, I do want to ask about the representatives of the community. So would that mean extending the CPRB and adding more members? And if so, do we have a sense of what size we're looking to grow to? Is it only those 2 members that we're talking about, either police brutality or represented communities, or are we thinking potentially a larger expansion?
So any one of the CPRB folks here, if you care to.
Hi, it's Ivy Morris again. I feel that, as we're saying, we're going through this process, and our recommendations are based on what we've heard from community members. So I think that these are going to be difficult conversations that we're going to have, but I think it's really necessary that we do. And it may include, once we understand, as Mr. Igo said, about a budget, about how many people would fill the body and who would be on it. I think that, we're going to get to that. And I think that it's really, I think it's good that we are there, but I think that we're going to make small progress. And I also think that it's not something that we can really envision at this moment. It's going to take more of us, having these conversations and hearing a little bit more from the community. But I do, as the other Councilman Hoey said, I'm optimistic that we will get to it. Difficult, but I think we'll get to it.
Agreed. And if I can just respond to that, I think that's important because we are all sort of in this state where we do want to move this forward and pass legislation because it's needed. But with these new recommendations, we will need to take a step back and adjust and modify to make sure it gets to the full point of where we want to be. So that's a very important sentiment.
Could I add something to, I'm not sure that's appropriate. Okay. I just wanted to say on the point about subpoena power, just from my experience working as the staff to the CPRB, it's important to understand that up until now, the CPRB's scope has been limited to basically whether OPS has done an okay job. So the only reason there would ever be cause to pursue a subpoena would be if OPS wasn't giving the CPRB some information that they had sought. And in my 4 years, to the department's credit, I've never seen a situation where the board members said, we'd like to know X, or we'd like to see a specific piece of information, and the police department said no. The police department's always cooperated fully with that. The subpoena power in the new proposal would be very different because you're talking about investigating the police officers or witnesses or other people besides OPS. So it's absolutely true. There's never been a subpoena request so far. But I just wanted to say from my own experience, that's because given the very limited scope of what the CPRB investigates, there's always been very full cooperation from the police department within that limited scope, just in case that's helpful.
Ava, Joe Igo again. So how many times since you've been there have investigators been used by the CPRB?
The independent monitors are used in about half of the cases. Wherever there is a...
Would you say monitors and investigators are the same thing going forward?
Well, I guess. I mean, the monitors are, again, they are sort of there to shadow OPS's investigation, not to do their own. So they're sort of they're flies on the wall, basically. Is their
in the legislation as it exists now, there's a spot where they say investigators may be former judges, this, that, and whatever. Okay, and they're going to be investigators. That's why I asked how many times they've been used.
Mhm.
I don't think they're going to do them pro bono. So that could be another expense, whether they're attorneys, investigators, and so it's just something that I am wondering about. So investigators are not monitors in my eyes.
Oh, I think that's fair. Yeah. I mean, particularly if you're talking about a fully staffed, investigations apparatus that's capable of doing a broader look, it will be more expensive. Yeah.
If I may just jump in for a second, as you know, the board does not stay stagnant, and although the subpoena power as it was envisioned before hadn't been used by previous boards, as Ava said, we have put great thought into reimagining how this process would work, and the investigative power and the subpoena power we see working together so that we can initiate, we can investigate along with APD, we can investigate without APD to make the process faster, to make the process more efficient, and to give the community what they're looking for. We understand that what we're asking would cost money, and we understand that there's a lot of people in the community calling for the police to be defunded, for money to be taken away from the police department and put back to the community. And while we don't see ourselves as the end all be all, we see ourselves as a part of it. So making this board as strong as possible so that we're not just given subpoena powers in word, but that they actually work and that we can use them and create something whereby people understand the process and the output has some teeth. A lot of people in the community are asking for it to be something real, for them to make a complaint. It gets reviewed quickly. The results get back to the complainant. And if something is wrong, that someone gets to say, that was wrong and recommend discipline or whatever, mediation, whatever it may be. We understand that will cost money, that it is going to take, be a change from what the compromise was 20 years ago, but that's what we want. That's what the community is want. And that's what the community wants. And that's why we're calling for it. But we think that putting money and time and effort behind these initiatives are very important. And that's why we're asking for them, given the moment in time that we are right now. But we believe this is how it should have always been. And the people that fought for these changes, I know Mark Mishler is on the line, and he's been for decades trying to get these things to come to fruition. So while it is a heavy lift, while it is a big ask, we understand that, and it's very important.
Joe, you got to hold up. Mr. Ballerin has been trying to get in.
Just to respond to, I had a question, respond to what she stated. And
okay,
about it, I thought she was saying parallel investigations at the same time with the OPS and the staff that the CPRB might be in place.
Yeah, if necessary, not necessarily with every investigation, but if the board so chose, then that the legislation would allow for that.
Okay, just want to be clear what I'm thinking about. Thank you.
Mr. Ballerin.
Thank you, sure. I think a lot of these issues we're talking about funding, I mean, if we're looking at 1%, we're looking at about a $550,000 budget, which is a lot of money. But if you look at our total budget, is a humble budget for what I would consider a new department or a new entity within the budget that then has to budget their funds as appropriately as possible to be as productive in what their purpose is. So I think, that would be, I think the dollar amount we can figure that out because it's not a huge dollar amount that we're talking about. 500,000. I mean, you know better than I do, Joe. If you've been here a long time, you can find 500,000 in the budget to make something work. So I'm a little more concerned with the having an elected individual on the board and how that would work with its current bylaws, where they're all currently appointed. But I think, we can figure that out. But that's when I'm looking at this, that's something that's popping up to me. I also want to say this. I'm one that really wants us to do this right and get it right because this is something that may be on the books for a long time. So I'm glad we're gonna have the other two policies moved on today, but I'm also glad that we're listening to new input, and I'm gonna allow other members from the public to speak because really, I think that's key because every time we do that, we get more information and different perspectives. So those are my 2 points.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ballard. And so I want any other member from the Public Safety Committee to step forth if they want to comment, and then council members before we move to public comment. I can't, JR, do you see any hands raised for folks that want to?
I do not from other council members.
Okay. There's no one else.
Michelle and I are keeping a running list of people who are chatting us who want to speak. So if you want to move to the public, it's up to you.
Okay. So yeah, no, we'll move on. What I would say to members of the public that are going to be speaking right now, just I need you to stay focused on the policies and the laws that we're discussing here. Well, right now we're talking about the CPRB and just these reforms in general. So I'd like the commentary to be focused on what we're talking about. Okay, go ahead.
The first person is Luke Forbes.
How are you guys doing? You can hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
So to speak on everything that has been discussed so far and brought up on this conversation, I would first like to speak to the actual subpoena power given to the board. It is very necessary that is given to the board, because as what we're seeing go on within our communities is people really do want to get involved with what's going on with the community review board. We file complaints. However, these complaints have been taking years to be answered. And that is what is discouraging individuals to continue to proceed with complaints. But as people become more aware of the administrational procedures to follow upon complaining against officers, people are starting to utilize that a lot more and will start to utilize that a lot more, especially if the community review board is given that outreach budget to also hire someone to do outreach for them. It will give the people in the community that knowledge. So that is necessary, not only to give them the subpoena power, but also give them the actual budget so that they can hire the staff in order to teach people and educate people about how to get involved with them, what their board is there for. And it is necessary that this board is treated separately than the Office of Professional Standards. I have a list of things that I basically have been jotting down as this conversation has been going on. As Councilman Legal, I apologize if I'm botching your name. Lego has basically said the unions are what have been stopping a lot of things from transpiring when we are trying to really change anything. Especially, it would have to be something that is negotiated with the union contract when we are talking about giving the community police review boards that actual involvement in the the disciplinary procedure. But I think that that is necessary, and it is something that needs to be brought up in all these conversations moving forward. If we're not talking about renegotiating the union's contract, we're not talking about reforming the police in any way. The contract of the union has to be reformed in order for us to have any actual reforming of the police. There is no other way. And really, when we're looking at what is going on with the Office of Professional Standards, I do applaud the commissioner for basically, the commander for basically not saying anything, because it's like, I get you, that department has not been able to get any real movement with what has been going on with Albany's police department. And it is necessary that the community review board be a part of those disciplinary actions. And I bring up cases like what happened on Central Avenue, where 3 officers actually went into a person's household and removed money and drugs from it and didn't report that to evidence at all. And when they were asked about it after a videotape of them actually doing this was submitted to the police department by the defendant who they illegally arrested, they actually didn't get any trouble at all, because the union argues for them to only have to redo that evidence taking class. And there's stuff like that. There's stuff like the Kimani Addison situation, where those officers are still walking the streets, still getting paid. They're still out after they really just kidnapped someone live on camera, and we're calling it something different because of the union protection. If they weren't protected with immunity due to the union representative arguing for them, those officers would have to be charged how they should be charged, because they had no jurisdiction or justification to cuff him, arrest him, or steal his automobile vehicle as they did. And there's stuff like that. The Luke Dare situation, where there were more officers involved other than just Luke Dare, as well as those officers who lied under on those reports. Those officers who lied on those reports committed perjury, which is a misdemeanor, and them committing that act of misdemeanor while acting under duty is also a misdemeanor. And they violated their oath of offices, so they should no longer be police. And these are things that are being argued against due to what is going on with the unions and their ability to protect people who basically make flagrant acts of violation, not only legal violations, but also violations of their policies. When we're talking about giving them subpoena power, we're talking about giving them actual power for real disciplinary action to be given here. When we're talking about renegotiating the contract to include them into disciplinary action, we're talking about actually really giving out disciplinary action moving forward. When we're talking about new people on the board, we're talking about inviting new people to the board to make suggestions like this, because we won't have suggestions like this unless we're inviting people that are directly impacted or not benefiting from what's going on. And when I say not benefiting from what's going on, because the community who is being directly impacted has no benefit of the police brutally attacking them and still being able to keep jobs. So we want to really give that inclusiveness into what's going on, especially even when it comes to these racial bias audits, having them done every 5 years. That is a good suggestion. We don't want to have racist police. But when we're saying we don't want to have racist police, what are we doing to stop racist police? Doing an audit to audit them and see if they're being racist is one thing. But if they are being racist, what are we doing with this data? Are we firing these people? Are we giving them racial bias training? If they complete that racial bias training but still show racial biases, what are our next steps? We don't want to have a police department that allows races in their ranks. So we definitely want to make sure that these audits are actually doing something. You just seen recently with the police officer who was talking to the sheriff deputy how he feels about the Black community. That was a casual conversation that he was having casually. That's not the first time he had that, nor was that the first time he had that with a coworker. And you can tell that just by how calm he was, how easy it was to go about doing that. So it's definitely necessary, again, the subpoena power, new people on the board, the racial biases, but we need to expand on what those racial bias audits will do. What is coming from that information? Are we just gathering that information just to have it, but still let these races be in our police department? Because that kind of goes against what we're saying all right here. And we want to also put that into legislation that police officers will not be hired if they show any racial biases within their audits. And we also need to make that retroactive so that we can really start having a non-racial police department. And we need to also make a contingency that if someone is applying to become a police officer and they show a racial bias, that they can be offered a racial bias training. But if it's not about really, like, if it's not really benefiting us in any way when this person comes back and they still show racial biases, we shouldn't hire this person. And that's really important. Also,
okay, Mr. Forbes.
I wasn't done. I wanted to really finish.
Can you hear me?
I'm staying on task. I just want to really finish down.
Right. No. I'm saying, can you finish?
Mr. Ford, we have to be equal to all the people, the public.
Right. I forgot to mention the time limit, but I'll let you finish up.
Yeah, because there was no time limit mentioned. But just to really finish what I was saying, that was all here real quick. Councilman Lego, I'm sorry if I'm botching your name.
Igo.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Igo. So he said it was a compromise before giving the community police review board subpoena power. And I'm really big on semantics. He said it was a compromise. So like when that shouldn't be a compromise, giving the community the ability to also call for investigations. That should be equalness, because this movement all right now is all about equal and inclusion. I just want to really make sure that people understand that this is no longer a civil rights movement, that no one's asking for anyone to be civil with them, that we're asking for equalness, that everyone is included, that everyone is equal here. But to proceed about what I was saying, we really want to make sure, because the Office of Professional Standards, even when police officer Christopher Kaido and Utica was arrested for basically killing a man while he was purchasing a prostitute, they didn't send Internal Affairs out there. Internal Affairs was actually recommended to not go, nor did they proceed in going out there and really investigating what that was going on. So there has been proof that we need a bigger body, a more body with more teeth and more eyes there that is willing to also investigate these police officers, because we see how police officers have basically there's not an equal standing of how much people can really get done. And even now, they're still building more ways to build their power. The police department now offers business classes to their police officers, which really makes no sense, where these officers should be having scholarships for probably criminal justice, sociology, something that makes sense. To give them business classes, it really makes no sense to spend to give these people business classes when they're serving the community. They should have something that is offered to them that is in their lines. You wouldn't hire someone on as a zookeeper, but then offer them a scholarship to be a
Mr.
plumber.
Forbes,
But, just to move back on
Mr. Forbes, can you hear me?
I'm finishing right now, because it's about
Mr. Forbes, you're also going off the legislation. You're not. The beginning we discussed that you need to be on the legislation.
So back to the legislation, giving people access to subpoena power and the data is really necessary, and adding new people to the board is really necessary so that we can get new suggestions, new things included in. It's all about equalness and inclusion. I'll stop going for right now.
Thank you for your input, Mr. Forbes.
Thank you.
Who's next?
Mr. Mishler.
Hi, good evening. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Councilman Kim Roop, for convening this meeting. And I really appreciate Mr. Forbes, your comments just now as well. Thank you for that. So I'm going to try to be as brief as I can, but I may have trouble doing that, but I'll try. So here's what I would say. You know, as Nairobi mentioned, I've been involved in this for many years, and many of you know this. There's nothing new about the demands that are being made by people in Albany. There's nothing new about the problems that exist with the Albany Police Department. Many of us have been around a long time. We know that the Albany Police Department has been characterized by racism, brutality, and a lack of accountability for decades. That is the character of the Albany Police Department. And what has happened periodically, including 20 years ago, when there was indeed a compromise made when this board was established, because there was another proposal that would have established a board that would have had much more power than the board that ended up being established. And so this board was a compromise. And the point is, the same demands now are what was being voiced in 20 years ago when this board was established. It's the same demands that were being voiced in 1984 after Jesse Davis was murdered by the Albany police. There's nothing new. What I'm hoping is that we will see something new, in that the Albany Common Council and the mayor will finally see fit to take action in a bold manner to really take on the issues of racism, brutality, and lack of accountability on the part of the Albany Police Department. And that's in your hands, all of the members of the council who are on this call. You can either decide to try to tinker with something again, give a tiny bit more power, give a little bit more of this, a little bit more of that, repeat, everybody repeats, how concerned everybody is about systemic racism. The point is, you are all in the position to either do something about it or to just continue with business as usual. And I think that what the times are calling for, and what people in the city of Albany are calling for, is bold action. I'm completely impressed and overwhelmed really by the thoroughness and the detail and the boldness of the proposals that have come from the board itself. And I'm in full support of the proposals that are outlined in the December 12th letter from the board. And I guess, we should all be sick and tired of tinkering and little minor reforms, because the problems will not go away. And so what's needed is to have a board with real power. What's needed is to have a board that truly is representative, a board that has the resources to do what's necessary to take on issues of community police relations, and to investigate and take action when something is wrong. And by doing that, build confidence in the public, build confidence in the community, and ensure that there will be changes in the functioning of the Albany Police Department. So I don't want to go, I could say a lot more. I want to respond quickly to some of the points that were made by some of the council members who spoke earlier, some of which have already been addressed, I think, but I just want to chime in myself. Mr. Conti, you raised it's a really interesting question. Should we ensure that there are people on the board who have themselves been subjected to police brutality and police misconduct? And you ask, well, might that result in some bias among those members? And I think, respectfully, Mr. Conti, I think the question is just backwards, because what you didn't ask, does having somebody on the board who has not experienced police brutality, does that create a bias? The answer is, of course. Everybody has biases based on their own experiences. So we have a board filled with people who have never experienced police brutality or police misconduct, then they have a bias. The bias is basically that their life has been informed, and their viewpoint has been informed by not having experienced that. Why is that acceptable? Frankly, I would support having a board entirely made up of people who have experienced police brutality or misconduct. Who better understands how this actually works, what the harm is, the trauma that people face, the continuing effect of such trauma? Who understands that better than people who have actually experienced it? I understand we're not going to, my proposal that all the members of the board be people who've experienced police misconduct. I get that that's not going to happen, but we could at least have one person or more than one person who has to share that viewpoint and that experience and what it means to be brutalized, what it means to have a lack of accountability by law enforcement, what it means to have to live with that, what the impact of that is on your family, on your community. To have that viewpoint within the board, I think would be invaluable. My council member, Mr. Igo, some interesting questions. So, subpoena power, the truth is the subpoena power was not in the original board when it was adopted 20 years ago. It came in a little bit later. It was indeed a compromise. And as has been pointed out, it deals with a very, very specific issue within the very limited powers that this board has. And so the fact that that subpoena power that is very limited and only deals with situation where OPS has made a report, the board's dissatisfied with that report, has asked for a response and doesn't get an adequate response to their expression of dissatisfaction, only then can the board even request a subpoena from the Common Council. So, I mean, the lack of those requests is really irrelevant if we are talking about reformulating the powers and the authority and the functions of the review board, in which case they will need to have full subpoena power. In regard to the funding issue, Councilman Ballerin sort of answered, 1% of the police department budget is actually not that much, which is true. In addition to that, the city could save quite a lot of money, in several ways. Number one, cut the police department drastically. So, cut that budget drastically. We do not need to be spending so much money on the police, especially when a lot of what the Albany Police Department does is engage in brutality, acts of racism, false charges, false documentation, and a lack of accountability. Why are we spending so much money as a city for a police department that functions in that manner? So let's dramatically slash that budget. That would save money in the police department, but also would mean that the 1% for the review board is much less. So that's a way to save money. Plus, and somebody mentioned this in the chat and I fully agree, I think it was Lauren Manning who mentioned in the chat. Thank you, Lauren. If the city of Albany really gets a handle on this and really does better in regard to how the police department functions, the city will save so much money. Think of all that you spend to have outside legal counsel represent the city and represent police officers in lawsuits. How much money is wasted on that? How much money is spent settlements and verdicts against the city, which is not wasted money, but how much money is spent on that? All of that could be used in much better ways for the betterment of the people of the city of Albany, to improve our neighborhoods, improve our community, improve opportunity for everybody. So I'm all in favor of saving money, but not by refusing to give money to the police review board and refusing to give them power. That's not how you save money. You save money by making sure that the police department functions properly and is reduced in its power and authority. Thank you. I'll stop there, but I'm hoping, and I'm not sure if I should be optimistic or not. I'm trying to be optimistic that this is the time the Albany Common Council will step up, will demand bold action, will take bold action, will say the business as usual is no longer going to be accepted, and it really is time to move forward in a positive way into the future. I'm hoping, and I hope I'm not disappointed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mishler. The time limit is 5 minutes, okay? From this point forward, stay on point with the legislation. I'd like for folks speaking to give us their address. That's what we typically do. I forgot to mention that when I opened earlier. So Mr. Pichardo, can you, who's next?
Next, I have Chief City Auditor, Dr. Dorcia Pleers.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm jumping back on the camera here. So thank you so much. Address is 6 South Marshall Street, Albany, New York. And just want to thank you all so much for the opportunity to speak tonight. And I've been very appreciative of the questions, comments from council members and the community. Following Mark's comments, I'll just say that, and when Councilman Ballerin said, you know, this may be on the books for a long time, so we want to get this right. It's been 20 years since the last piece of legislation has been revisited in a very thorough way. And this is in fact a watershed moment for our entire nation. And it is my belief that for those of us who truly understand that we have a problem in our country when it comes to racism and systemic racism and bias, that we need to seize the moment to act. And while there are those who really don't think that we have a problem, who don't think that it's that bad, for those of us who know this is not the time to be timid or shy in our actions, this is in fact the time to be bold in our actions. And so I commend you all for the important work ahead as council members. It's not easy work. It's not easy work. And I've sat there with all of you and understand how difficult it can be at times in your shoes. And so I just commend you all for having these meetings and having authentic conversations about what we need to be doing. As it relates to my question is specific about the audit. The recommendation to have the audit conducted every 5 years. I just wanted to get an understanding of where that time frame came from. Having initiated this process, one of the things that I learned early on is that the audit gives us a baseline to assess disparities in racial outcomes. And the baseline then gives us the tools to evaluate how well we are doing as a city from that point on. And so if we wait 5 years, my concern is that how much is missed over that period of time. And so as Chief City Auditor in this moment, it's something that my office is looking at. How often should we be implementing an evaluation of audit findings? We evaluate the city's fiscal status on an annual basis. That's an annual audit that's conducted no matter what. And so I'm just curious as to what the thought process behind the 5-year mark came from.
Dorsey, I can jump in. I think it says at least every 5 years. And I think that the proposal when it was written was taking into account the cost. And we just wanted to make sure that it continued to happen on some regular basis, but we definitely aren't opposed to what you're saying, an annual or more frequent basis, and your expertise in that. We understand. We're just saying to make sure that it continues to happen on some regular basis, but it was just at least 5 years, that being the floor.
Thank you.
The next person I have is Lauren Manning.
Thank you.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay? I got my earphones in, but I'll take them off if you can't hear me okay.
We can hear you
clearly.
Okay, so I wasn't going to speak, and then I was, and then Mark Mishler hit on most of it, so I'll be very brief. I want to say I'm in support of all of the recommendations from the CPRB's December 12th letter. But in particular, I just wanted to discuss how important an advocate is and how necessary it is. Let me start here. My address, 8 Tyler Trice Terrace, Albany, New York, 12207. The former Adi Arbor. I am an Arbor Hill resident currently, but I'm a 44-year resident of Albany. I've lived in pretty much every neighborhood. But I've also attended CPRB review board meetings in person, pre-COVID, virtually after COVID. Through my job, we are a site, the Center for Law and Justice, who accepts those complaints when people don't want to go to the police station. And I will say from my experiences, most people who come through our office need help completing the complaint form. Not just because of issues of their ability to read and write, but as you can imagine, when you've experienced something traumatic, it's really, really hard to sort of sit down and put that all in writing if writing is not, you know, your normal best way of communicating. So I think it's necessary for that. But I also think it's necessary to address issues of fear of retaliation. I do understand that currently the board is tasked with protecting complainants from retaliation, but I don't know how they do that without all of these recommendations, the increased power and the increased budget in place to do that. And even right down to somebody maybe saying something legally incriminating if they've been charged, but yet they want to put the complaint in. So I think that advocate is really, really necessary. I also want to point out that I think it's an excellent idea to have a formal community survey like the one the center did. I felt as if it was really sort of ignored and brushed off as not being scientific, but you guys have all the money to make that happen. And if nothing else, those results should have prompted a formal one by the city, and it didn't. So I was a little, you know, saddened to see that it didn't prompt one. So I think that's a really, really great recommendation. But additionally, I see the talk really hedging around funding. And I really just want to support what Mark says, you know, and what Common Councilman Ballerin said. It's really a small amount in the big picture of things. But furthermore, like he said, saving it just alone on lawsuits, on legal representation, on the time and energy spent investigating it, but furthermore, on the money not spent repairing burnt down buildings. Because I promise you, as a Black person in this city, this will not be the last uprising you guys see if you don't do something and if you don't act. And I think the CPRB has really worked hard on these recommendations. I think it encompasses everything that I personally and through work hear from many community members. And they just really need to be supported in these recommendations because those are the ones who know best. And I think it's really important, even if you're not specifically looking for somebody who has experienced police brutality, you need to at least have at least one seat voted on by community members. They should be appointed by the community, somebody that we feel will represent our interests. I think most of the members of the board do the best job they can within the box they're given. But right now, the community has no trust, no even expectations at this point from the CPRB. And it's not because of the individual members, but the box they're given to work within is just so small. It's ineffective. It really does nothing at all. And if this is supposed to be our police department that our tax dollars pay for, and this is what you guys hear the community calling for, I think you really need to act. And that's it, you guys. I know other people went over. I don't want to take up too much time.
Thank you, Ms. Manning. JR.
I apologize in advance. I cannot pronounce it. Aden Sukach?
Aiden Sawchuk.
Aiden Sawchuk, I apologize.
Thank you. How's it going, guys? My name's Aiden Suchek. I'm part of the Youth Political Alliance, born and raised in the South End of Albany. Lived here 23 years, my whole life. I just want to first say that I'm in support of the board's December 12 recommendations fully. I want to speak directly to the council in saying that, dragging your feet on this will sort of perpetuate a long history of Albany politics being defined by like a machine system that is really designed to maintain the status quo. I think this is something that, Mr. Mishler touched on. And, I'll be pretty brief because I think Ms. Manning and Mr. Mitchell, you guys really touched on it, and you too as well, Luke, a lot of what I've been thinking and feeling. And, I think that continuing this history of sort of not really embracing any kind of radical change, but sort of just tinkering with things will result in a change in the council because, more and more young people specifically will be making their voices heard, not just like on the streets or even on forums like this, but at the ballot box as well. We've seen that happen around the country. It's gonna happen in Albany. It's already happening in Albany. I just want you guys to all be aware of that. You don't have a lot of time to get this done, straight up. I mean, like we've mentioned that this has been an issue for 20 years. I as a young person right now, this has been an issue for me only recently as I've become more politically active in the last couple of years. But I just want to really stress that like the time is now for you guys to really step up and make this, a really big deal for you guys because it's a big deal to us in the community. This is something that affects people in the community every single day, all the time. So please don't like drag your feet on this or block or obstruct the voting process in any type of way. That's really all I want to say. Thank you guys, obviously, for the work. CPRB, appreciate you guys and the work that you guys have been doing. It really means a lot. And specifically also, thanks for everyone else from the community that's spoken.
And that was the last one, Mr. Kimbrough.
Okay, any further questions, comments on the legislation? I can't see everyone. Okay, that's it. No one else. So what I'd like to do is that was most of that had to do with local law J. So it's going to need some work. We're going to have to work through and incorporate the newer recommendations. So we'll set that aside at this point. But I would like to go back to local laws H and I to work on moving them out. And Mr. Hoey?
Yeah, I move that we move out of committee with a favorable recommendation, local law H and local law I.
Okay, can I get a second?
Second.
Mr. Ballard, second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, so those will be moved out to the full council for vote at our upcoming council meeting. The local law
clarification, just for clarification, Mr. Hoey meant for local law I as amended, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Right, and so what I would say also is that amendment. Can you pull it up on your screen just to give folks a look and see what it is? It's just a minor one line that was added. We were all pretty much in agreement last meeting with the data collection of local law H. The only change, Mr. Richardo can bring that up. It's the video camera use and reporting law. And while he's pulling that up, I'll just add the added section was under section D. You pulling that up? Okay. So will you just highlight the change? Okay. Can we all see that? It's the report from The police chief to the common council, based on the calendar year, reported a number of times cameras have been turned off and the summary of reasons the requests were approved. The addition is section 1. The report shall identify any officer who has turned off their camera more than once in a reporting period. That's the amendment. Any discussion for committee members? Because that was a recent adjustment.
I had a question.
Yes.
What is the reasoning behind more than once?
Just from my part in this, it's if there was a pattern of this occurring, and again, remember this is are you saying it should be you think it should be more or less, or I don't
No,
understand.
I guess in terms of my own opinion, I'm wondering why we didn't say, like, report would say if they've done it once, it would be identified. It seems like it's more than one, so 2+, right?
Well, we're getting it when they right. Well, I guess yeah. So it'll be 2 on the second instance. I think the idea is allowing for accidental or a mistake or an issue that way. And again, this is a report to the council regarding turning it off. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So that was the amendment. And the other local law H we didn't change. So you can take it down, Mr. Pichardo. So again, we got that motion. Did we vote on the motion? That's not that.
It passed.
It passed, right? It passed. That's what but I wanted folks to see what the change was.
Mr. Hoey has his hand up.
Hey, Kelly. I wanted to find out about Jay, because in the text box, I respect a lot what Mark Mishler says, and I just want to make sure we get this right. I don't want to delay it, but one of the things he said, maybe there could be other things in there. Is it too late to add to this if we needed to, or?
So Jay?
Yeah.
No, the whole purpose of us having this conversation now is to add to Jay. We just got that last list of recommendations from the CPRB like 2 days ago. So the idea is to try to incorporate this stuff so that, you know, the comments from this meeting will be incorporated into that stuff for our, I mean, we've had a decent amount of input. I think our next meeting, we could have all of this tight, everyone's comments and edits and amendments in there and just move forward with it.
Yeah, I'd really like to ask Mark if he had the time to, if he has recommendations, I'd love to see him because he more than anyone deals with the situation a lot. So, and he has a breadth of knowledge. So, you know, I'm just throwing that out there. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Igo, looked like you were trying. You're muted, sir. Mr. Igo, you're muted if you want to. Oh, you good? Okay. All right, so those two, H and I passed out with a positive recommendation. We'll move on to the full council. For local law J, we have to make the amendments. And actually, to your point, Mr. Hoey, maybe we should have some other voices. I mean, aside from just the letter for reference, maybe some of the folks involved in coming up with those edits or amendments should be in the conversation. What I'll do is, as we're discussing it, I'll have Miss Andre reach out to both members of the CPRB and any other interested parties about as we move forward and we craft and put it together to look in on the changes that were made, so you can see it down on paper as we move forward. I know it's been a long time coming.
And also, also do not forget, this local law might have an amendment with some financial impacts on it as well. So we have to really look at that as well, putting that part of the local law if we're going in that direction. So that will be a major amendment as well. The
Right.
financial impact of the
Right.
local law if we choose to go that way.
Right. For we're talking local law, Jay.
Yep.
With that, I would, unless someone or anyone had anything further, thank you for all of your input. It's invaluable, and we'll be in touch moving forward. The idea is for this to be open, transparent, and again, all of these, what we're doing here is to try to build in transparency to make and build a better relationship between the police and our communities. And I think this is a step in the right direction and necessary. So with that, if no one has anything further, I want to move to adjourn the meeting. Again, I can't really see my screen. So for any one of the chats where folks text it, it's just a black box. I don't know if it's Zoom. I should have updated it or something, but I can't see anything. Did I miss anything? Mr. Pichardo, is anyone messaging something I should be focusing on?
Ms. Morris has her hands up, and I apologize. My Zoom is not acting right now too, so it's not you. It's not you by yourself on that one.
Thanks for that. I just wanted to say that based on all the conversations we're having here, I agree with the things that Mark and Lauren and others of the community are saying. Albany deserves, the community of Albany deserves transparency, accountability, and whatever it takes to get to that, whether it be funding or expanding boards or starting new programs. I think that's, again, this is the time to do it. I think that also to look into how this may help cost-effective wise moving forward. So I just wanted to say that. Again, I want to thank you all for including us in the conversations. The CPRB worked really hard. Ask Ava. We worked really hard with Ava's help, and we appreciate this opportunity and where we are, and we just want to kind of make sure that, as others have said, that we get it right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Morris. Mr. Nani?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say that, I fully support all the recommendations that are before us from the CPRB. Albany, like many other cities, are demanding that our police department, be reformed in the wake of George Floyd. And I'm glad that we are moving forward, that all the council members are in support of these reforms. There's nothing better than an idea that has arrived. And I think that sometimes, individuals want, most of the time, the perfect is the enemy of the good, and we shouldn't do that. The people of Albany do not serve the police department. The police department is supposed to protect and serve the residents. And I feel that this discussion and all the ideas that are being put forward is a step in the right direction. Is this going to stop all the police brutality and accountability? No, but I believe, and I strongly believe, is a step in the right direction. And I want to thank the CPRB. I want to thank members of the community. I want to thank all the elected officials who are supporting these reforms. It really means a lot. Individuals in this city, particularly in communities of color, don't trust the police department for the most part. And I think that these reforms will gain some of that confidence back and know that at the end of the day, law enforcement in this city work for the people. And if the people want reforms, that's exactly what they're going to get. There are individuals who are a little bit concerned about the 1% of the $55 million that is coming. Me personally, I think that's actually, we should look at increasing that number. If we really want to have independence as it relates to holding law enforcement accountable, we need individuals who are going to do the work. We need individuals who are going to have the resources to provide that confidence that many communities of color are demanding and asking for. So I just want to thank everyone who is supporting these reforms. You know, I would thank individuals who have been advocating for this in the 90s and 2000s. And I know that there's some, I think it was Councilmember Igo who said that there was subpoena powers that were given, complaint that was given 20 years ago, that individuals didn't come forward. Well, today's a new day in Albany, and I'm pretty sure that if we give them the subpoena powers, there are individuals who are going to come forward. This is the sentiment of many of our residents, and I'm glad that all of us are working together to restore the confidence that the residents are asking for. And another note, there's I know that Councilman Igo's, Councilman Hoey said that it's, you know, we should wait a little bit to get some response from Mark Mishler and other community members. And while I support that, I think that we need to get this moving. We need to pass this year. Justice delayed is justice denied. And I think that any longer to pass this into next year will actually lose the confidence of many of the residents. We had a press conference in June about some of these reforms. We are 6 months, and now we're finally passing these reforms. So we are essentially delayed, and I would like to pass this at the next council meeting. Local law I, local law H, local law J. So if you have any recommendation, please send it to us immediately. Thank you.
Ms. Frederick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the questions in the chat was detailing out next steps, and I think that would be helpful just to discuss the one that we're amending with everyone on the line here. Would you be up to doing that?
Yeah, I mean, the two we passed out, the local law J, we have to add language for the new recommendations. The thing is, I mean, there's a cause and effect in here. It's not as simple as saying, okay, let's shove this all in there. We got to kind of be realistic about how this plays out. I support the reforms, but again, there's budgetary issues. There's some questions that have not been answered, but I'm sure in short order we can come together and take care of that. Mr. Anani's timeline we only have one more. We have a 21st meeting. Can we get it done and together for then? That's possible. Get together with some of the folks in the room and Mr. Pichardo to move forward. That's being optimistic and ambitious because it's a lot. But that's how we're going to proceed. We got to make the edits, the amendments, and move forward. Mr. Hoey.
Yeah, now, would we have to have another public safety meeting to pass it out of committee, or would we pull it at the council meeting if we have everything all done?
Unfortunately, though, because it's a local law, when it's in its
18.
final form, it has to age for 7 days per state law.
Okay. And I just want to respond to Councilman Anani that one of the things that came up, Mark mentioned that we didn't hit everything that he thought we needed in this, that's outlined in the CPRB letter that just we got a couple of days ago. So parts of that letter are not in local law J. We want to get them in there. So it's not that we're trying to delay it. It's that we're trying to get the changes that have been requested from the community in there. And all I was saying is that if there's something that we missed, because Mark talked about, he's been dealing with the problems here for, almost 20 years now. There's things that he sees that maybe we should have also. That's all I was saying. I mean, it doesn't have to wait for that, but, it'd be nice to get everything in there that will really help the citizens and the people who live in Albany. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for that. And I will say, like, there's portions of the latest recommendations that there are considerations. We can go ahead and do this, but then there's a collective bargaining agreement that has to be dealt with in response. I mean, the police union could just say no and not agree to it. So it's not as simple as we're laying it out here, but again, we're going to move forward. Mr. Anani.
I just wanted to respond to the council members' remarks. I just want to say that I think I was just looking at the chat box where Mark Mishler said that I agree with Councilmember Owusu Anani. This should move forward. I do not hold any special knowledge. The CPRB proposals are worth adopting now, and I agree. Let's do it now.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Anani. And with that, motion to close the meeting. I get a motion from, unless there's someone in here that I can't see that has another question or comment. I think we're
There's no one else I see.
there isn't. So for committee members, is that a motion, Mr. Ballard?
I just want to say something.
Uh-huh.
Because I don't want us to leave here people thinking that we're stalling on this. I mean, I think we're trying to do this correctly. I think there's been a lot of input that's been brought in since we had that conversation in June, that if we would have passed this in August, we wouldn't even be talking about some of the reforms that were proposed in December. So I totally understand the sense of trying to get something done quick, but it reminds me when I was a student. You know, I'd take my paper and I thought it'd be an A paper, and I'd get it and I'd go to the writing center and they rip it apart, and then I'd go back and fix it, and then I'd take it back to the writing center and they rip it apart again, and I'd go back and fix it before I handed it in. Because once you hand it in, it's a lot harder to go back and make any corrections. So I know people are frustrated at the fact that we're kind of at the finish line, and it's taken longer than some would like. But the fact that we didn't just push this through in August is why we have the recommendations in December that we're looking at now. So I get the frustration. I just don't want to leave this meeting where we've had 2 votes on good legislation. I don't want to leave this meeting people feeling that, oh, well, it's just being pushed back. No, we're trying to get another vote, but we also want to make sure we do it right. And we also want to make sure that it's sustainable and that it can hold through the times, and not just something that we hand in and rush just to be able to say we did it. Because we can just say we did it, but if it's not sustainable and actually make some positive changes, we're doing the same thing that's been done in the past. So I get the frustration. I'm frustrated as well. I just don't want to leave this meeting people thinking, you know, with that type of mentality. Thank you.
Yes, and the goal isn't to slow this down. It's to be thorough and make sure that it's proper, and make sure the way the pieces fit together are correct. Not trying to do away with it, not trying to just hold it for the sake of holding it. Again,
Mr. Kimbrough, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I could see, yes, Mr. Johnson. I see you're waving.
So first of all, I tried to go through this meeting without saying anything, right? Because I think that the community did a good job of speaking up and making their points heard loud and clear. But I feel that I have to say that we can't act like we are rushing through something when this pretty much sat around for months. The people spoke, and it's time for change. And I know that we're in our immediate neighborhoods, we are experiencing change, and sometimes change isn't always easy to accept. I've been on both sides of change, and I just think that it's a good faith for us to address this, because the community has spoken, and they have spoken a long time ago. So the only reason why we're making amendments to it is because we didn't move when they spoke months ago. So I just think I just wanted to go on record and thank the speakers tonight and thank the community at large for keeping this message going. So that was my 2 cents for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so just moving on to closing. But I would say where we are now versus before, we're at more comprehensive reform than before, but we can go back and forth with that. So, but with that, I'd like to close the meeting. I got a motion from motion to close. Need first and a second. Everyone frozen. Tom is motion. Second. Does that mean we don't want to close?
We don't want to close. We want to keep it going. Let's talk about local today. No one second.
With Ms. Frederick, just second. All right. All in favor? Aye. From the committee. Thank you, everyone, for your time. We'll get working on this, and it's the change is coming. All right. So, but everyone, have a good night. Happy holidays. Be safe.
Good night.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
I'm Michelle.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm good.
All right. Good to see you. Good night.
Good night.